Introducing the IBCC Digital Archive. Over 1 million men and women served in RAF Bomber Command during the Second World War. For 4 years, from the fall of France in June 1940 to the Normandy landings in June 1944, aerial bombing was virtually the only means that the Allied forces had of taking the war into Germany's heartlands. Some 101 RAF bomber stations were dotted along the east coast, centred on Lincolnshire. Attrition rates among aircrew were high, as were casualties on the ground. The front line in a bombing war was everywhere. After the war, Bomber Command's role was downplayed. Bombing did not fit comfortably into the narrative of a just war, especially after Dresden. There was no mention in victory speeches, no special medal. Veterans and their squadron and station associations turned inwards to each other to keep memories alive. Now, 70 years after the fact, a permanent site is in the making in the city of Lincoln to tell the stories of those caught up in the bombing war. The International Bomber Command Centre, or IBCC, is a partnership between the Lincolnshire Bomber Command Memorial Trust and the University of Lincoln. A grant of £3.1 million from the Heritage Lottery Fund is enabling the collection and dissemination of a people's history of this neglected aspect of the Second World War, mainly through construction of an online digital archive and an exhibition at the IBCC's new visitor centre on Cannock Hill. It will include military and civilian stories from both sides of the conflict and from all over the world, in a spirit of understanding and reconciliation. In these respects, it will be unlike other military heritage centres. The digital archive collects 2 kinds of sources: oral histories and private papers and documents. Since the archive came into being in early 2015, our quest has been to collect the testimonies of as many surviving veterans and eyewitnesses as possible. Unusually for an oral history project, this has meant working with people who are at least in their mid-90s. We aim to record and to preserve the humanity of people too often portrayed as heroes, victims or criminals. What our interviews do best is to preserve untold stories from individuals who are only now being given a voice.
I used to drive them to the kites at night. One night there was somebody I liked very much, and we had a place where we could iron our trousers, and I ironed mine every night. I like to be smart. And there were lace curtains in this room, and the window was open. And I was thinking about him. I thought, oh gosh, I do hope he's okay. And he'd come back. And all of a sudden the curtains went whoo like that. And I knew he wouldn't come back.
To date, we have collected over 400 such interviews. Because they are more than military recollections, they are also of interest to social and cultural historians. The more tangible artefacts being preserved in the archive also represent the stories of the ordinary and the everyday, rather than the decision-makers and the top brass. This history from below includes personal papers, letters, diaries, logbooks and photographs, as well as pieces of uniform, clothing and lucky charms. Until now, these items have been kept by their owners in tin boxes and parcels on top of wardrobes and in sock drawers. We are digitising, preserving and sharing treasured family heirlooms and keepsakes that have often not been seen by anyone outside of their owner's family for over 70 years. Tens of thousands of documents, photographs and objects have been added. None of this would have been possible without the archive staff and a large number of volunteers, work experience students and interns. Volunteers both in the UK and abroad are trained to assist in numerous ways, including conducting oral histories, scanning documents, creating metadata, and undertaking research. Our technology has been deliberately chosen to be accessible to the widest possible range of users. Our digital archive does not contain any physical items. Rather, it is made up of what can be described as ephemeral primary sources. Items are only loaned to us. Once digitized and returned to their owners, the originals are beyond the control of the archive. Similarly, oral testimony disappears as soon as it is performed. In terms of accepted archival science principles, we maintain objects' original relationships by provenance. The digital nature of our archive also allows us to create new meanings by aggregation. By using a consistent set of metadata, the archive will grow around clusters of resources generated by aggregating items that share an underlying concept. Our preservation masters are produced according to high-quality standards and are based on lossless, uncompressed, stable and widely recognized formats. They have multiple levels of redundancy achieved by both duplication and differentiation in order to mitigate the risk of a catastrophic loss scenario. We intend to cater for every anticipated need in the future. As we will not have further access to the original, the digitize once principle is the only possible solution. Our publishing platform is Omeka, an open source and widely used tool. This choice eliminates the common risk of vendor lock-in. It is also based on Dublin Core, a straightforward metadata standard, again in wide use. More importantly, the same standard can be used for our heterogeneous range of resources, stretching from oral histories to archival materials, from artworks to industrial and technical heritage. In building the digital archive, we are combining two seemingly irreconcilable approaches to archive construction: diffuse and unorganized crowdsourcing on the one hand, and dependence on highly professional expertise on the other. First, experts and staff create a framework of warranted information, which is available across the entire archive as authority records for places, pieces of equipment, roles, military terms, concepts, and so on. Then we harness volunteers' lay knowledge and shared interest in Bomber Command to describe resources at item level only. The archive team provides training, some of it online, and reviews practice to achieve the highest level of consistency. To underpin the process, we have devised a set of technical specifications, as well as the systematic use of external and internally produced controlled vocabularies. This model is the metadata equivalent of financial leverage, in that it allows us to make available a large amount of information by actually creating only a tiny fraction of it. The ultimate goal is to make the archive as accessible as possible to the broadest range of user groups. We have built the framework to accommodate variance between full and abbreviated forms, official designations, and slang, spellings, and their equivalents in other languages. Thanks to a system of referrals and redirecting links, users can retrieve the correct resource, even if they use an unconventional query. Another large piece of work being undertaken entirely by volunteers is the compilation of a database of Bomber Command losses, Again, our approach is inclusive. We are recording the details of all those killed as a result of serving or flying with Bomber Command. As well as aircrew, the database includes male and female ground staff, other service personnel, and journalists. The database will eventually include losses not only sustained by Bomber Command squadrons based in the UK, but also in North Africa, Italy, the Middle East, and further afield. There are 38 items of information we would like to complete for every entry: name, service number, date of birth, squadron, and so on, which means that some 2.2 million such pieces of information have already been captured, checked, and cross-checked for accuracy. This database is the source of all the names that appear on the memorial walls around the spire at the IBCC site. Although the archive is not yet available online, we have already used its treasure trove of resources in many different ways. Archive holdings will form the basis of the IBCC exhibition, and staff and volunteers are also involved in exhibition design and interpretation for this purpose. We have also produced a pop-up exhibition for display at open days and other events, and have participated in the university's exhibition, Reflections on the Air War. We have launched a lecture series exploring the history of Bomber Command, now into its second year. Already there is substantial research in progress on the memorialisation of Bomber Command on 5 group newspapers, RAF Neuropsychiatry and Oral History with Elderly Informants. In addition, we have established valuable partnerships with institutions and groups in Italy to collaborate and collect material. We hope that this is just the start of a wider engagement across Europe and beyond.